My name is Lena Cross, and a single holiday meal shattered the illusion of my family. It was a snowy Christmas Eve in Cleveland. The dining table was immaculate, the ham glazed to perfection. My father sat at the head, raising his glass for a toast. Then he delivered the blow. "Some children truly make you proud," he announced, pausing just long enough for the words to cut deep, "and others simply occupy a chair." The room filled with uncomfortable laughter from my brother, his wife, even the young cousins. I didn't react with anger or tears. The scene is set, introducing the central conflict and Lena's stoic response to public humiliation. Instead, I offered a calm smile and said, "Good thing I closed on an apartment 2,000 miles away. You won't have to save a seat for me anymore." The silence that fell was more powerful than any shout. For the first time all night, he was speechless. Have you ever been diminished by your own blood and smiled simply to endure it? Tell me where you're from. I need to know I'm not the only one. I grew up in a sleepy Ohio suburb where every house was a replica, every driveway held a similar sedan. Lena's powerful retort establishes her independence and directly connects with the audience, seeking solidarity. Our home was a modest blue ranch with white trim, always smelling of fresh laundry and gasoline. Neighbors would wave from their porches, and on Saturdays the whole town seemed to gather at the same pancake house. To them, we were the ideal family. Mark, the reliable father; Carol, the nurturing mother; Jason, the high school wrestling champion; and me, the quiet daughter they often forgot to include. From the outside, we were a postcard. On the inside, I was the silhouette that made everyone else seem to shine brighter. Introduces the perfect family facade, and Lena's role as the overlooked child, establishing the core dynamic. Jason was the son of our household. His awards filled the living room cabinet, golden wrestlers, ribbons, and plaques that caught the light. I would sometimes trace the engraved letters of his name, wondering if mine would ever be deemed worthy of display. When Jason won, Dad would hoist him onto his shoulders. When I brought home a perfect test score, he'd glance and say, "That's nice, Lena. Don't forget your brother's regional finals are tonight." I remember that phrase more than any childhood song, highlights the blatant favoritism through specific memories, cementing the father's fixation on the brother. It was the relentless rhythm of my youth, the constant beat of partiality. At 11, I won a local art contest, a red ribbon for a watercolor landscape I'd poured weeks into. I'd practiced after midnight, mixing colors quietly at the kitchen table. I thought perhaps this time his gaze would change. When I showed him the ribbon, he just smiled faintly. "That's lovely, Lee. But we all need to be ready for Jason's tournament this weekend. He needs our support." That word "our" never truly had a place for me. A specific childhood memory reinforces the pattern of her achievements being dismissed in favor of her brothers. My birthday arrived a month later. Mom baked a simple chocolate cake, no decorations, no candles spelling my name. "Just us this year," she said quietly. Yet the following week, they hosted a massive barbecue for Jason's scholarship offer, a tent, a DJ, half the town invited. I recall watching from my window as string lights twinkled in the yard, my brother laughing with friends around a cake that read, "To our champion." That was the night I understood my invisibility wasn't a mistake in our family, it was by design. The stark contrast in birthday celebrations serves as a painful turning point in her self-awareness. Even mealtimes had their own hierarchy. Our dark wood table had 5 chairs, 3 for adults and 2 smaller ones at the foot. For years, even as I grew, they never moved me from the children's end. At 15, I was still there, my legs too long for the space, listening to adult conversations that flowed around me. Any attempt to contribute was met with polite smiles, quick subject changes, or sheer indifference. Jason could discuss sports or politics, and Dad would listen intently. The physical metaphor of the kids' table powerfully illustrates her perpetual infantilization and exclusion. If I mentioned a fascinating historical fact or a scientific discovery, Dad would shake his head. "You overthink everything, Lena." "It's not good for you." Mom wasn't mean, just cautious. She was a woman who believed peace was maintained through silence. When Dad spoke, she'd busy herself with tidying. When I was upset, she'd whisper, "Please don't stir the pot, dear." Her gentleness was somehow more painful than his sharpness. At least his tone acknowledged I was there. Hers quietly erased me from the picture, develops the mother's character as an enabler whose passivity is its own form of betrayal. There's a photo from a long ago Christmas. Jason stands behind Dad, both in matching sweaters, beaming. I'm partly cut out of the frame, holding a serving dish. Mom took that picture. I saw it years later and noticed how my smile was only on my lips. You can see the truth if you know what to look for. A girl trying to occupy as little room as possible in her own life. Still, I fought to earn my place. Straight A's, debate team, building computers from scavenged parts. Nothing made a dent. The family photo is a poignant symbol of her marginalization, despite her continuous efforts to be seen. The more I accomplished, the more I faded, as if my light was a glare on their perfect portrait. Once, when Jason failed a history test, Dad devoted the whole Saturday to tutoring him. That same weekend, I was accepted into a prestigious national math league. I handed him the letter. He glanced at it absently, his focus on Jason's textbook. "That's fine," he said. "Just don't make your brother feel insecure." That directive stayed with me. It taught me the fundamental rule of our home. The father's request for her to dim her light solidifies the toxic family rule she must live by. My silence was the currency for their comfort. Reflecting now, I see how young I was when I mastered the art of vanishing. I learned to speak softly, to make myself tiny in group photos, to walk without making a sound. I learned to fold myself into the unwanted spaces. By 18, I was an expert in being overlooked. The garage became my sanctuary long before I understood the word. While the house vibrated with ESPN and my father's laughter, my world below was one of quiet focus. Describes the psychological impact and the coping mechanism of finding a physical refuge away from the family. It was chilly and smelled of concrete and cut grass, but it was my domain. Every part of that cluttered space, from the rusty tool bench to the shelves of old paint cans, felt like holy ground. I didn't have a room where my opinions counted, but I had a corner where inanimate objects awaited my command. It began with a discarded calculator I rescued from a trash bin. Dad called it worthless, but to me it was a puzzle. I took it to the garage, unscrewed its casing. The garage is established as her workshop and sanctuary, where her curiosity and competence can flourish. I stared at the complex grid of circuits and chips. I didn't grasp the engineering, but I knew it had once held answers, and now it was silent. I spent days on the cold floor, studying library books on basic electronics, watching online repair videos late into the night. After many failed attempts, the screen flickered to life, displaying a bright, clear number. A feeling swelled in my chest, triumph, perhaps. For the first time, I had commanded something broken to work again. Her first successful repair marks a pivotal moment of self-efficacy and validation outside her family. I had made something listen. I rushed inside, clutching the calculator. "Dad, look, I fixed it." He didn't glance away from the game on TV. "That piece of junk? Good. Now get your brother a soda. He's had a long practice." I stood frozen, the calculator feeling like evidence of my own existence in my hands. Then I turned, walked back to the garage, and set it on my bench. I never brought it up again. That was the night I vowed to myself. The father's dismissal of her achievement is the final straw, leading to a vow of independence. If no one in this house would see me, I would create something impossible to overlook. From that point, the garage transformed into a laboratory of quiet defiance. I dismantled everything I could find: old fans, broken printers, discarded remote controls. I learned to weld, to rewire, to breathe life into discarded things. Every sizzle of the soldering iron felt like a pulse, a reminder that I was still here, still capable. I couldn't mend my family, but I could repair almost anything else. Her refuge becomes a proactive workshop for building her future and self-worth. One autumn at 17, I assembled a functional drone from parts scavenged from the town dump. The propellers whirred unsteadily, but when it lifted off the ground, I felt like I had unlocked a new dimension. I taught myself programming, learned 3D modeling from online courses, and filled journals with schematics for inventions. This wasn't about running away, it was about constructing a reality where I finally had a place. Of course, my father didn't understand. He'd come out to store something. Her technical skills grow, symbolizing her building an exit and a new identity separate from her family. He'd look at my clutter of motherboards and cables and mutter, "You waste too much time on this trash? Find a real hobby?" I never argued that this trash was my salvation. Mom would sometimes appear in the doorway, her face shadowed. "Don't strain yourself, Lena," she'd murmur before disappearing again, as if her presence in my world was trespassing. It wasn't malice. It was routine. The routine of avoiding my father's disapproval, even if it meant being absent from my life too. The parents' continued disinterest and criticism contrast with the profound importance of her work. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday, sandwiched between pizza coupons and a utility bill. The envelope was thick, with a bold university logo embossed in gold. UC Berkeley, College of Engineering. My breath caught. My hands shook as I ripped it open, my eyes scanning the life-altering words. Congratulations. We are pleased to offer you a full academic scholarship. I read it repeatedly, terrified the words would dissolve. Then I ran to the living room where my father sat with his newspaper. The climax of her hard work arrives with the scholarship offer, a tangible ticket to her future. "Dad," I said, my voice trembling, "I got into Berkeley." A full ride. The name felt like a key on my tongue. For a heartbeat, I waited for his reaction. Shock, pride, anything. He slowly folded his paper and looked at me with an expression of bland curiosity. "Berkeley?" he repeated. "That's all the way in California, isn't it?" I nodded, still breathless. "Yes, it's a top engineering school." He leaned back. "That's too far. Jason's at Ohio State. Sensible. If you go, you're on your own." The father's cold rejection of her monumental achievement underscores the profound lack of emotional support. He reopened his newspaper, the discussion clearly over. My mother, wiping the counter, said, "Your father's just concerned about the cost?" But she didn't look at me. No one said they were proud. No one suggested a celebration. The victory that should have been shared became a solitary gem I carried alone. That night, I sat in the garage and unfolded the letter. The words no longer felt like an accolade. They felt like a launch sequence. I whispered Berkeley, letting the sound echo. The scholarship transitions from an achievement to be recognized to a necessary means of escape. Leaving didn't scare me anymore. It felt like my only option. The months flew by in a whirlwind of saving and planning. I worked at a bookstore and sold my custom-built gadgets online. Every penny was a step toward freedom. When I left for the airport, it was a quiet, overcast morning. At the terminal, my mother gave me a swift, cold hug. "Call us," she whispered. My father stood stiffly. "Just remember your roots." As I walked to security, I glanced back. He was already walking away, his back to me. The departure is cold and unceremonious, finalizing her understanding that she must find validation within herself, not from them. 5 years later, I stood backstage at a major tech conference, my heart thrumming a steady rhythm. The hum of the crowd was a familiar music now. On the screen behind the podium flashed the logo for my company, Axiom Robotics. I adjusted my blazer, my fingers brushing against the old faded calculator I still kept in my pocket for luck. I thought of the garage, the silence, the desperate need to be heard. When I walked onto the stage, the spotlight was blinding. I took a breath and began to speak, my voice clear and unwavering, carrying across the vast auditorium. I was no longer the girl trying to fit in the margins. I was the one drawing the map. The story concludes with Lena achieving professional success and, more importantly, finding her own voice and platform, symbolizing her complete transition from invisibility to empowerment.